Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org. Hi, this is Bill Kenower for Author Magazine, and today I'm at the University Bookstore in Seattle, Washington with legendary fantasy author Terry Brooks. Terry, welcome to Author.
Thank you, Bill.
So, Terry, thanks for doing this.
Happy to be here.
This is kind of a full circle moment for me. I became a voracious reader in 1977. I just finished Lord of the Rings.
Good timing.
And the next book I picked up, what do you think it was?
Sword of Shannara.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And so here we are, a bunch of years later.
I'll say.
And you've spent 40 years in this world.
50.
Oh.
If you count the 10 years I spent putting it together.
Right.
Yeah, I started writing it in '68 when I was in law school and going crazy and thinking of dropping out. And
Why were you going crazy? Just
because I hated law school. I despised it. I wanted to be a lawyer well enough, and I thought that would be really interesting in dealing with people's problems, and all that was very attractive to me. But the process of getting there and spending hours and hours on case law and things that I thought were as irrelevant as Latin was when I was in high school, were driving me crazy. So at any rate, my parents convinced me to go back and do this, so I did. In that year, I remade my life, and I said, all right, the first thing is I'm going to do, I'm start writing again, because I had not been writing. I had been study.
And you had been writing as a kid?
I was writing from the age of 10.
Interesting, okay. So, but I picked it up in, like I said, '77. Mm-hmm. Lord of the Rings had come out. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons. The world of fantasy was starting to grow a little bit. But you're a lawyer in 1968. Mm-hmm. That's not the profile for the time and person to start dreaming a fantasy world.
Yeah, and I didn't read fantasy growing up either. I was a science fiction kid because all boys read science fiction back in the late 40s and 50s. I just worked my way to reading Tolkien. I was 22 when I read Tolkien, and it was given to me by a girl I was dating, and she said, read this, you'll really like it. And I did. I loved it, and I loved the format, and I wanted that format for a story.
Why? What did you love about it?
Well, first of all, it was a huge canvas, and I've always been a huge canvas kind of guy. I want big, epic kinds of stories, because when you grow up in the cornfields of Illinois in a small town, you want something bigger than what you know.
Right.
So that was a big part of it. It was also the intrigue of talking about creatures that were imaginary, that were fairy tale-ish, and then creating a story that captures the realism of how the real world works, because that's what Tolkien did. He pictured in a different way the way the world really operated, and he took a common man, which is a revelation at that time, not a prince, not a king, not a heroic person, just this kid who all he wanted to do was be left alone so he could get on with his life in Hobbiton, and put upon his shoulders an impossible burden to bear, and then he had to see it through to the bitter end. Would he do it? How much responsibility was he willing to shoulder? How much was he willing to give up? And that's the same thing everybody experiences on some level in their world. So that the reader identification is huge. And right away I said, this is what I want to write about, because everybody is going to relate to it right away.
Also struck me as I look back on my early love of fantasy literature. I eventually stopped, I would read other stuff, but it was big for a time in my life. And I think it because there was also a spiritual element to it, a sense of good and evil, and of magic being, there's something beyond this physical world almost. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think the other thing is that when the stories that we enjoy always have an element of good and evil, I think, pretty much. At least the kind of things that I enjoyed. So I'm always writing about what I enjoy. Selfishly, I suppose, but that's it. Right. And I thought, all right, so in good and evil, what really matters? Well, what really matters is how do you identify what's good and what's evil? Because so much of the time, it's a big gray morass, and it's not just clear cut. And we know that everybody's flawed, and the characters that are interesting are the characters who are flawed. And what is it about their flaws, and do they overcome them, or do they get consumed by them? And I wanted that element in the story. I wanted flawed characters. I wanted them to be either basically good or basically bad, and yet there were redeeming features, or there were also the flaws in their character. And to make the story revolve around how that worked. And explore how you dealt with those things.
When you're finding your characters, is the first thing you're looking for the problem, their what they need to learn, or do you just know it? Does it come to you intuitively?
If you think of it as a stage production, for a minute, we've got this play, and usually I'm a story kind of guy, so I've got something I want to talk about.
Right.
It might be political. It might be something to do with the world at large.
So first you have the theme, kind of.
I have the theme.
Okay, so you start there.
Almost always I have the theme, and usually some basics about the storyline I want. Then I have to have the characters. So they come on stage and they audition, and sometimes they make the casting, and sometimes they go back to central casting to write another book.
Right.
But it's sort of like that. So then when I've got my characters, that I think, okay, this guy is going to carry this particular role. So then the next question becomes, what's good about this character, and what's bad about this character, or more to the case, where's the strength, where's the weakness, and does the weakness undo this character at any point, and do they get to pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Does somebody else save them? And then it's sort of a kind of a snowball situation where one thing kicks in with another, not always in a linear fashion, but in some fashion that I can say, okay, there's a scene, there's a chapter, whatever. Then we go on from there and so forth. And then it'll all change when you write it.
That's what I was going to ask you, because the first writers' conference I ever went to, you were there, and you were on this panel, and you were evangelical about the outline.
I was.
Like, wow, this guy is. And then I believe during the conversation you had with my co-editor, you were like, I'm not sure if I'm into the, and so you've changed around the outline.
Well, one of the things, now we're really going to digress a little bit. One of the things I didn't realize when I started out, that I now tell young writers, I said, the person you are now, the way you do your process, the way you work, the way you think, it's all going to change. It's not going to stay the same, because you are going to change, we hope. You're going to grow, you're going to become different things are going to become interesting to you. You're going to develop a different psyche. Your lifestyle is going to change, because maybe you have kids now, maybe you're going to have a wife, maybe you have a day job, that could all change.
Your interests are going to change too, what you care about is going to change.
I mean, for sure, that's going to change, because the things that drove me at 20 are not the things that drive me now. The things that I'm impassioned about at that age, I'm not that impassioned about now.
I write essays a lot, and sometimes I think I know what I'm writing about, but then 3 sentences in, sometimes just a phrase comes that I didn't predict, and I go, oh, that's what this is about, right? And I always say, drop what you thought it was, Bill, because this is the thing that's here right now today. And I feel like the writer who doesn't listen to that is not listening to their genius.
No, you have to listen to your instincts about things like that. And I used to say, I haven't said this for a while, but the fact is that with every book I've written, at some point in the book, 2 things happen. One is that I am convinced I have just written the worst piece of crap ever, and that this is the end of my career. I'll finish this book and retire. Every book. No question. And then I will go, pull myself back together again for a few days, and it'll be all right. The other thing that happens is I'll get that aha moment where I'll say, that's what I missed about this book. That's what needs to be in here that's important. This is what this book is about that I'm not saying. And then I'll have to work it into the story as part of what's going on. That happens every time. Never fail. And I just wait for it to happen now. I don't even think about when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen.
Well, Terry, I got one more question for you.
Okay.
And what I'd like you to do is finish this sentence for me. If writing has taught you anything, it's taught you what?
It has taught me that everything in your life about your writing and the process is going to change as you get older.